example, I did serve in the Israeli military. I did not want to serve in the occupied territories, and except for some basic training and a week doing guard duty in some remote Jordan Valley settlement in the middle of nowhere, seeing no Palestinians. Beyond that, I did not serve in the occupied territories. I served in Tel Aviv, but overall, of course, I mean, the main argument here would be why serve at all? Um, this is this was a wrong decision, and I had to educate myself.
I wanted to circle back to your personal story that you shared right at the beginning, where you spoke about your grandmother who escaped a concentration camp or a ghetto because of an uprising. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Is that the Warsaw Ghetto?
So no, this was in Poland. This was another place. I think it was the Vilnius ghetto, but I have to check. But there was more than one uprising. But she did recount, some horror stories, having to flee as the German guards were just trying to spray them, with bullets, and trying to dodge bullets and trying to run and hide in the forest. And of course, many of us, dissidents here, we have been using the term ghetto for Gaza for years. Now, it's a concentration camp, it's a death camp, but, before that, we were using the term ghetto. And I do accept the use of the term jailbreak for what happened on October 7th. It was a Palestinian jailbreak. So once again, violations of international law, and international law matters, and all of that, but it was several things, one of them being a Palestinian jailbreak from the Gaza ghetto into Israel. And so you can see all these connections. Survivors, Holocaust survivors from Europe, being sent here to live in empty homes, in emptied homes, in depopulated Palestinian villages. So everything is so connected. And if there's any specific population or country that needs to know that, it's Germany, of course. Germany, with at least the German elites, political elites, with their amazing, disgusting hypocrisy, being on the wrong side of genocide each and every time.
Ofer Neiman, thank you so much for joining again today. Wanted to ask you a few questions about yourself. Now, I know that you're born and raised in Israel, and you're a Jewish Israeli citizen. And you are part of the BDS movement. But I guess I want to know a little bit about how that eventuated, how you were born in Israel and realized a good over 20 years ago that something wasn't right.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I was born here in Jerusalem. On my mother's side, most of the family perished in the Holocaust, killed in Poland by the Nazis. My mom was a baby. She was born during the Holocaust, and she survived by being actually adopted by by two Polish farmers who raised her as their own. And there were quite a few cases like that, quite a few stories, very similar. And my biological grandmother did survive the Holocaust. She managed to flee one of the ghettos when there was an uprising, and she was a nurse, so she fought with the partisans as a nurse. And after the war, she did manage. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for the adoptive parents as well. I understand that, but they did give her back to my mother, to my grandmother, who took her and then remarried. She remarried another Jewish Holocaust survivor from her town, and they were sent to a camp for displaced people run by the U.S. Army in Regensburg in Germany after the war. And they had the option of choosing either America or Israel. They chose Israel, probably for Zionist sentiments, which had very little to do with any understanding of Palestinians or colonialism. They came here after 48, after the Nakba, and they were sent to a depopulated Palestinian village, a village which had been ethnically cleansed maybe a year before that, not far from Tel Aviv, without having any understanding, knowledge of the history of the place. And later they moved to another um, Jewish city that was built not far from Tel Aviv called Hulon. And this is quite a typical story for Jewish Israelis here. I grew up so in within Israeli society. It was more like rather liberal part of Israeli society, liberal Zionist. But in general, there's racism around you. Um, on the societal level what the kids say, the jokes, some racist jokes, racist songs, and so on. Um, Stuff on media. So you typically regard Palestinians as a threat, and there's also this tendency to regard Palestinians as not civilized because they're not Western, and so on. All those racist tropes. I think that personally, I never supported racist violence or dispossession. This always seemed disturbing to me. And one of the things that shaped my views was um, reading as a teenager, reading reports by B'Tselem, that's a famous Israeli human rights NGO, and we may have some more to say about them right now. At the time, they were publishing reports about Israeli brutality, IDF brutality in the occupied territories, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, which was under direct Israeli control at the time. I think this had an impact on the way in which my political views were shaped here, reading all these reports on brutalities, which of course are nothing in comparison to the genocide and atrocities that Israel is perpetrating now in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. But just reading about people getting beat up and kind of tortured in ways which are quote unquote minor. Of course, we should never say minor about torture, but in comparison to what we're seeing now, all kinds of abuse. This was an eye opener for me. But again, in my part of Israeli society, this is again, it was quite common to criticize the 67 occupation, the brutalities, but without having a deep understanding of Zionism as colonialism or an understanding of the Nakba of 1948. So, for example, I did serve in the Israeli military. I did not want to serve in the occupied territories, and except for some basic training and a week doing guard duty in some remote Jordan Valley settlement in the middle of nowhere, seeing no Palestinians. Beyond that, I did not serve in the occupied territories. I served in Tel Aviv. But overall, of course, I mean, the main argument here would be why serve at all? This is this was a wrong decision, and I had to educate myself. Um, and during the Oslo years, I was always skeptical of the prospects for even peace, but beyond that, just justice and equality, because I was seeing the ongoing violations on the ground, even during the Oslo years, the expansion of settlements, land grab, a lot of detention without trials, so-called administrative detention. And of course, in the past 2 decades or so, things have become much worse and are becoming worse and worse. And I've been active on several issues related to all this. I mean, at first I joined Yesh Gvul, which is a group for supporting refusers, Israeli soldiers who refuse to serve either in the occupied territories, or nowadays it's usually just refusal to serve altogether. But I was feeling that this was not enough. That we were unable to sort of come up with a sufficient number of refusers to really change reality here. Um, Perhaps a surge of refusal in the early 2000s was enough to, one of the factors pressuring Ariel Sharon into his disengagement plan regarding Gaza in 2005. But this was no peace and justice solution either. So this was frustrating, and it relates to my general notion that without international pressure, it's impossible to change from within, to change Israeli society from within, to end occupation, apartheid, even the genocide now. And I was always supportive of international pressure. When the BDS campaign emerged, I supported it. And later in 2009, a group of Israeli citizens called Boycott from Within, who support the BDS campaign, was founded. And I became active in that group. And ever since that time, this has probably been my main hub of activism around Palestine. Um, I try to post a lot on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and often as an Israeli citizen, I think that the voices of Israeli citizens identifying as such and calling for drastic measures against Israel, such as BDS and arms embargoes and ICC indictments of Israeli war criminals, are important. They carry some weight. In an ideal world, this should not be the case. I mean, in an ideal world, Palestinian voices should have even more weight. But in our world, um, Israeli citizens and in general Jewish voices speaking out against Israel's crimes um, carry more weight, and we have to sort of use it carefully, with the caveat of being careful here about also trying to amplify Palestinian voices and fend off this racist, deeply rooted notion that Palestinians are somehow less credible or less important as critics of Israel's apartheid and genocide. And of course, in the past 2 years, things have been very hectic in terms of activism, trying to do things, trying to raise awareness. Um, and, as Israeli citizens, we can um, post or issue our own statements individually or sometimes collectively. I can recall quite a few petitions and joint initiatives that I have been part of in the past 2 years of the Gaza genocide. Of course, nothing has helped us stop the genocide. I do think that we have formed a much stronger network, though. We do have the capacity to, I think, to hold Israel accountable and force a change at some point. But of course, right now, the main focus is all hands on deck to stop the genocide, to force Israel to stop its genocide in Gaza.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ofer. I really appreciate you sharing that information. How does your family feel about you being so active?
So I have a small family here, and personally, I don't have a problem. I mean, I communicate a lot with my mom about this, and she shares my basic sentiments. She may still regard herself as a Zionist, considering her own resume as a Holocaust orphan. I'm thinking that maybe there should be some sort of Jewish state, but when it comes to a specific moral choice regarding apartheid, occupation, genocide, she's always on the right side. She never supports these atrocities that Israel is committing, which is quite a lot because we don't have too many Israelis like that. Beyond that, people in general, not just myself, may face problems, just all kinds of social problems. I mean, even if you're just on social media posting in Hebrew, and you have a fairly high profile, you may sort of attract all kinds of nasty folks and trolls and people who threaten you. There are some targeted harassment campaigns against Israeli activists. I don't think I have been one of the main victims here because I don't have a very high profile. I mean, within Israeli society, I'm not a well-known, I'm not an artist or anything. But others who do have some sort of public profile here have paid a price. For example, losing some contracts, having their shows canceled. So it's not always easy. If you live in a small community, you may have problems with your neighbors. Some people have had to leave small communities and move to a bigger city such as Tel Aviv, where there's more freedom. You don't it's not such a tight social uh, um, fabric there.
Mhm.
And yeah, and of course, on top of that, if you go out to demonstrate at some points, depending on what's going on in the region, you may face more police brutality than usual. You may face more violence from fascist counter protesters. Um, so you also have to be careful about that. Overall, I would say that Jewish Israeli citizens here, I mean, dissidents who are opposed to Zionism, occupation, apartheid, genocide, settler-colonialism here, the whole thing, are still privileged in the sense of having a voice and being able to speak out. For example, what I'm doing right now, this is not something that I'm likely to be arrested, as a result of speaking out here. I mean, I can post that, Netanyahu is a murderer, a genocide, or a war criminal. He should be arrested. And the Israeli government, the regime, the apartheid and general and genocide regime is unlikely to arrest me for that.
But if you were not of a Jewish ethnicity and you were um, Israeli Palestinian, would there be consequences if you were this active?
Of course, there's a major difference here. The Israeli Shin Bet, Shabak, the security services are monitoring social media postings by Palestinian citizens of Israel, and Palestinian citizens of Israel have been arrested. They've lost their jobs for posting very basic stuff, not even a call for violence, for an armed struggle, for postings for the Palestinian cause. There's a lot of persecution. People have been arrested for months just for organizing demonstrations against the genocide. So it's much easier for Jewish Israeli citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, there were few occasions when some Jewish Israeli citizens did pay a fairly heavy price during the first days of the genocide. For example, a prominent teacher, a Jewish Israeli teacher, Meir Baruchin, Baruchin, that's his last name, was arrested just for posting against the atrocities that Israel was committed and saying that regarding all those rape allegations by Israel, which are say now mostly a hoax. I wouldn't say 100%. I'm not sure of that, but the mass rape claim we consider it an Israeli hoax. He posted about that, just saying that, I mean, note that Israel committed massacres and rape in 1948 during the Nakba, and he was vocal about Israeli atrocities, trying to speak out against what Israel was starting to do in Gaza. And he was arrested for several days.
Mm.
Uh, um, um, and some Jewish Israeli protesters had limbs broken by the police in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, protesting against the genocide or against the war in Iran, when there was a strict kind of policy enforced by the Israeli police against any public protest. But overall, as Jewish Israeli citizens, we're much more privileged than Palestinian citizens of Israel, let alone
Yep.
Palestinians in the West Bank, Gaza.
I guess that segues me into asking you the question about how you lost your Instagram and Facebook accounts, because you post a lot, as you've said, and you have thousands of followers, and it's not the first time that your accounts have been closed down. Do you have any information as to why and who is potentially attacking those accounts?
Yeah, so 3 weeks ago, my Meta accounts, both Instagram and Facebook, were completely shut down by Facebook for quote unquote fraud and deception. So I don't know exactly what this means, but perhaps someone complaining to Meta that I am a so-called bot. It's very common for Israeli for supporters of Israel to accuse people like me of being agents, Iranian bots and so on. So my accounts were completely shut down. In general, there's nothing you can do unless you have help. And I did have help from a Palestinian NGO called Hamle. They do great work on monitoring social media and the Palestinian cause, and they can help through their plot with Meta. They can help get some people reinstated in general on social media if their accounts are shut down. And fortunately for me, they did manage to have me reinstated. But this is kind of scary. You lose your voice on two major platforms. And I still don't know exactly what happened there. But we know that behind the scenes, Israel is working very hard to censor free speech
Yeah.
on Palestine, and they have quite a few of their own people working in various, in Meta, in Twitter, company running TikTok. I'm not sure I recall the name. I can recall the name right now. In influential positions, and that's a key campaign for them. We know that, because they know that they're losing badly in social media. They're losing the youth. People hate the state of Israel for a good reason. And they have failed. So what they're trying to do right now is censorship. But I'm cautiously optimistic that thanks to our strength in numbers, there's not much that they can do to really silence us on
Mm.
social media
Mm.
as a movement, as an entire movement.
Yeah. Thank you so much for explaining that. And I might take the name later and post it as to the organization that actually assisted you, because I think that's really helpful for people to know. And I myself fear that happening to me. It's your voice, like you said, and it is scary, and it is very unjust for something like that to occur for no reason other than, censorship. Another segue to a question that we have is regarding the myth that Iran is behind spreading a lot of fake news and fake information. And a lot of my Jewish family believe that I am, and many others are being manipulated by this fake information that Iran is running this campaign. What do you say about that? And have you heard that there is this information out there, that all this misinformation about the how Israel is conducting itself, and the fact that the famine is not even real, it's fake news. Do you know much about this myth that Iran is actually conducting this huge fake news campaign, and that a lot of the information that's out there is being critiqued as fake?
So Iran is waging its own psychological war against Israel. Israel is doing much, much more on its end, and but if the question regards, I mean, we can say something about the outcomes of Israel's war and aggression on Iran, and you know, all kinds of claims, the media claims around that. That's one thing. And regarding Gaza, we don't need the Iranian government. We know what's happening in Gaza. We have information from leading international aid agencies, human rights groups. And in fact, yesterday or 2 days ago, we had a vote at the United Nations Security Council, and 14 members out of 15 actually told Israel that it should stop starving Gaza in their own words. So even Western governments have recognized that Israel is committing crimes against humanity. They probably realize that it's a genocide too, even if they don't, if for now they're not saying that, and that Israel is responsible for famine and starvation in Gaza. No one needs any statement from Iran to know that, okay, including US aid. This is an official US aid organization. It's an organ of the US government, basically saying that there's starvation in Gaza, and saying that Israel is responsible. We also have statements from Israeli officials actually admitting that they don't think that Hamas. That's another excuse. The Israeli Hasbara propaganda. They keep saying, "Oh, well, Hamas is stealing the aid." So we have Israeli officials on the record saying, "No, we don't have evidence that there's any mass theft of aid by Hamas. If anything, there is mass theft and looting by the gangs affiliated with Israel,
Yeah.
such as the so-called Abu Shabab gang, which Israel is trying to sort of build up and promote in order to topple Hamas and a gang of former criminals. So we know what's happening in Gaza. I mean, and I think that by now it's just desperate Israeli propaganda, all these attempts at denying Israel's responsibility for starvation in Gaza, or even just denying the very fact of starvation in Gaza. Their excuses are grotesque. You know,
Yeah.
they will tell you. So again, one of the excuses is Hamas. Another excuse is, oh, it's just genetic causes. If you see a starving baby, it's because there's a lot of genetic disease in Gaza, and that's typical in Gaza. And then how can they explain the exponential rise in the number of these starving kids that we're seeing? You know, I think it's a desperate attempt by now. It's and full of contradictions. Israel is losing that war.
Yeah.
And this is, I don't think they can, I don't think they believe that they can convince the world that Israel is not perpetrating crimes against humanity and not causing starvation in Gaza. They are resorting to other Hasbara methods. Can say some more about that later.
Yeah. They have opened up some of the humanitarian aid corridors. Is that right? There is some aid that started to enter over the last week, I believe.
Tiny amounts. I mean, I think I can recall a stat by a UN official saying that during something like perhaps 4 months or so, or 2 months, when you need prior to October 23, you needed something like 600 trucks daily, every day going into Gaza.
Yeah.
There have been just a few hundred trucks altogether within a time span of at least 2 months, if not four. I don't remember right now if it's March to August or May to August, but the amounts are just tiny. There's still starvation in Gaza. I do hear occasionally of some, some corridors, some trucks going in with some more aid. But overall, it's still a genocide. It's still starvation, and the so-called GHF, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, are still, and the Israeli military next to them are still killing Palestinians who are desperately trying to obtain aid
Yeah.
at these horrific GHF facilities. Yeah.
What is their rationale, or are they blaming Hamas for the shootings and for the killings at the GHF centers? What is the Israeli public thinking is going on there?
So at first they were trying to deny it, but then we had testimonies from Israeli soldiers saying this is what the Israeli army is doing. Um, uh, Israel will say ridiculous stuff. They will say that when they see too many people assembling, this in itself poses a risk to the soldiers in the area. So so they have to resort to various measures to hold back the crowd. Um, I haven't seen any. I don't recall right now anyone in official Israeli Asbara claiming that someone opened fire at Israeli soldiers from within those Palestinian crowds. So I mean, so their arguments are so lame. I mean,
Mm.
just saying the soldiers felt threatened, too many people.
So they started
So
randomly shooting, basically, and it's like you're saying, it is so lame. Their justifications for the actions that the soldiers are taking. There was a crowd.
yeah.
Okay, well, people are hungry. Of course, there's going to be a crowd. I did see a lot of protests so far hitting the streets in Tel Aviv. Over 100,000 people were protesting. Is that mainly because they want the hostages home? Of course, I understand that that's a massive issue for them and for everyone. But are they at all asking for the genocide and for the war to end for the Palestinians, or is it really mainly about the hostages?
So among liberal Zionists, most of them are tired of the war. I mean, it's a genocide, but I mean,
Yes.
just for now, let's use the term that they're using, war. They're tired of the war, and of course, they want to bring back the Israeli captives. And in these demonstrations, the message is very centrist. They will not say anything about the genocide, and they still most like officially these movements don't even support refusal, even if it's just for the sake of stopping the war in order to bring back the Israeli captives.
Yeah.
On the individual level, more and more of these liberal Zionists are open to these discussions of the genocide, and they don't have much choice considering the fact that the world has recognized this as a genocide, and now even to Israeli prominent human rights NGOs and Israel's most famous writer, David Grossman, who's a part of the problem, but at least 2 or 3 weeks ago he did recognize that this is a genocide. So there's more openness to discuss suffering in Gaza nowadays, unlike last year or even earlier this year. There are occasional news items about the suffering in Gaza, about children in Gaza. Um, but Israeli media will not use the term genocide. The leaders of these protests will not use the term genocide, and the focus is bringing back our captive brothers.
Yeah.
And I think that it was quite impressive last week's demonstration in Tel Aviv, but this in itself will not suffice to stop Netanyahu. They will need more than that. They will need refusal, mass refusal, organizing refusal, working with the international community to boost pressure on Israel and I'm still not sure that they can muster the courage and the moral courage and the political understanding to do so, because this would really turn them into dissidents, kind of similar to what I mean, the smaller number of Israeli dissidents who have been doing this for decades, have been doing, and they really don't like us, all these liberal Zionists with the Israeli flags who are chanting, "Bring them back now." Uh, so it seems that for now they're going to be stuck on just, calling for an end to the war, bring them back now.
Mhm.
I would also add that while there seems to be a majority in Israeli society for an end to the war, definitely among liberal Zionists, the polls indicate very clearly that there's also a genocidal mindset here. Last week, in a poll conducted by Israeli experts, it turns out that I have the stats here. I can send you a link. That 47% of opposition voters, and the opposition nowadays is supposed to be more centrist, even leftist, liberal Zionist, 47% of those people agree to some extent with the notion that there are no innocents in Gaza. Okay, almost half. And 15% out of these 47%, I mean, 47% somewhat agree to a large extent with this notion, and 15% actually strongly agree, okay, to a large extent with the notion that there are no innocents in Gaza. And of course, when it comes to coalition party voters, it was much worse, more than 90% who
Mm.
think that there are no innocents in Gaza. So there's a genocidal mindset within Israeli society, and I think Israelis realize that, and they're not wrong about that, that, if Israel is forced to stop now and withdraw from Gaza, this is going to be a major strategic defeat for Israel. And I think that overall, even among liberal Zionists, there is still this uh, um, desire to get rid of Palestinians
Yeah.
in one way or another, to encourage perhaps some sort of ethnic cleansing, getting Palestinians to leave Gaza, so-called voluntary migration. Of course, it's not voluntary, it's ethnic cleansing. And I think that this view has deep roots within the entire Zionist spectrum, including the liberal Zionists who are protesting right now, explicitly calling for an end to the war. Um, Many of them are sort of deep down or
Yeah.
support genocide, or definitely support ethnic cleansing.
With respect to that particular topic of the voluntary migration, as they're calling it, do you know more on this topic and the countries that are being selected for the voluntary migration to take place?
Israel is working very hard behind the scenes to promote this plan. And I think that this is one of the main things right now for David Barnea, who is the head of Mossad, another darling of Israeli liberals, but he is right now in charge of promoting the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And he's been traveling across the world, including Washington, to promote various plans. So right now, some countries that have been mentioned are South Sudan, Ethiopia, Somaliland, not to be confused with Somalia, it's borders on Somalia, Libya, and Indonesia. Indonesia has denied this, but they will apparently open a hospital on some remote island for up to 2,000 wounded Palestinians from Gaza. But they have denied the claim that they are willing to receive Palestinians from Gaza. So these are the states that I can recall right now. Um, and I mean, for now, it's hard to see this plan materializing. I'm not sure that even the Trump administration will be working very hard for this specific plan. It goes even beyond giving Israel carte blanche to bomb in Gaza. It's actually helping them perpetrate ethnic cleansing. But again, for Israel, if Israel, from the Zionist perspective, especially the Zionist elite, the political elite, decision makers, from their own perspective, if they don't manage to get rid of at least most of the population in Gaza, they have lost strategically. And this is another reason why we need to be working so hard globally.
Yeah.
It's an uphill battle because right now we're at a crossroads. If we do manage to stop Israel, of course, there's so much that has to be done. People will have to be held accountable. But the silver lining, even if it's a small silver lining, is that this will be a strategic defeat for Israel. And there will be an opening for more pressure on Israel. And Israeli decision makers and Israelis will realize that they have no future here unless they accept um, um, major changes here. Of course, most of them will not accept the dismantling of Israel, which is what people like me demand, but they will realize that Israel has lost strategically.
Mm. I wanted to also talk to you about B'Tselem finally calling what is happening a genocide. What does that mean for Israel? Do Israelis know that they have made this determination?
So, yeah, I mean, it was covered quite extensively by the Israeli media. It was hard to ignore that. So, two Israeli human rights groups, B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights,
Mhm.
have issued reports stating that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. So this has received some coverage in mainstream Israeli media. But of course, these groups have been, for many years, have been labeled as sort of traitors or fifth columnists, etc. Um, and then we had David Grossman, a famous Israeli writer, also coming out and saying, yes, this is a genocide. The problem with these two reports is that they've come way too late, way after international groups and international scholars of genocide had already come out saying this is a genocide. And I think there was a lot of internal politics around that in B'Tselem, perhaps some forces trying to prevent or delay the publication of a report accusing Israel of genocide.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that in general, B'Tselem have not offered great leadership throughout this genocide. They don't have too many eyes and ears in Gaza. I think they had something like one or two field workers there. But they could have been more vocal, more assertive, proactive, recognizing the genocide much earlier. Other groups have done so. So I think B'Tselem have lost some of their edge.
Yeah.
And I think they will have to reinvent themselves. B'Tselem, in the past decade or so, prior to October 23, they were doing very useful work on the ground, at least in the West Bank. They had a project called, I think, Shooting Back, meaning shooting in the sense of using a camera.
Yeah.
They gave video cameras to Palestinians to record and document IDF violence and settler violence on the ground, which was very useful. But nowadays most people have smartphones with cameras. They don't need a camera from B'Tselem to do that. They can just record stuff on their own and post it immediately on social media
Yeah.
without B'Tselem. And now that there is even things on the West Bank are so much worse, ethnic cleansing and Israel is destroying entire neighborhoods and refugee camps. Settler violence is horrific. But Salem, I think in a way they failed to meet the moment. I think that leading human rights initiatives right now are focusing perhaps less on raw data, footage, which is very, very important. Don't get me wrong, but on integrating information from various sources and coming up with good statements, good legal statements, public statements, calls to action. And B'Tselem are not really great at that right now.
Mm.
And in general, of course, most of the Israeli human rights NGOs have been, so if B'Tselem have been mediocre, most of the NGOs here have been terrible, just amplifying Israeli claims, on all kinds of atrocities that did not happen on October 7th, even though there was a massacre and Hamas did kill Israeli citizens, but the mass rape hoax and things like that, which Physicians for Human Rights actually amplified in one of the reports.
And the beheaded babies
Um,
hoax is how it's being described as well.
yeah, beheaded babies, Palestinians slitting the wombs of pregnant Israeli women, baby in the oven, and so on.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, there was a massacre perpetrated by the Palestinian resistance. Yeah, and there were war crimes being committed. Of course, this is again, all of this is still a part of a liberation struggle, but you have to admit that crimes were committed. But Israel has been hell-bent on spreading lies to boost the genocide, and Western media have been entirely complicit in amplifying these claims, unfortunately. But back to Israeli human rights NGOs, I think they will have to reinvent themselves. Um, yeah, okay, so you can post so much footage of what's going on in the West Bank right now. In Gaza, we have Palestinian journalists. We don't need B'Tselem. Then the question is right now in terms of activism. So several years ago, B'Tselem's director at the time, Hagai Al-Ad, went to the United Nations and actually gave a very good speech calling for international pressure. And I think that Israeli NGOs need to boost this line of reasoning and work harder on promoting international pressure on Israel, BDS, boycott, sanctions, even if it's a specific, a selective call, but be very assertive in promoting such a campaign. Otherwise, um, they're going to lose their edge, even though they are based here. Because
Mm.
there's so much responsibility here that we as Israeli citizens bear, and Israeli NGOs with funding, often from Western governments. Um, they have power, they have influence. Even if people hate them in Israel, they have international clout, and I think they should be using this clout more
Mm.
aggressively.
Mm. This might be a bit of a tricky question, but do you think that Israeli society truly comprehends how public opinion has changed since October 2023 and how people think and feel about Israelis, particularly the IDF, and the negative light in which they are viewed across the world. Do they understand this?
So people realize that there's a problem and they are scared, especially liberal Zionists who have broader interaction with the outside world, if they're entrepreneurs, scientists, in business, and so on. And this is something that the Israeli media has been covering.
Mm-hmm.
But still, this is often framed as just Hasbah failures, that Israel has failed in, trying to explain to the world why we're doing what we're doing, or just saying this is a rise in anti-Semitism. The new
Mm-hmm.
spiel is actually regarding Europe. Is just saying, oh, Europe is becoming Muslim, so they have to cater to a growing Muslim electorate. And this often comes with ultra racist coverage, including our mainstream public channel, which would be the equivalent, I think, of ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, and this is a liberal Zionist reporter based in Europe, actually doing an item on the rise in the number of babies named Muhammad in Europe. Imagine that, the racism.
My goodness.
Yeah, so they're framing it as all kinds of problems that have nothing to do with the fact that Israel is committing genocide. It's the world against us, or more and more Muslims, or just anti-Semites, or that Hasbara is inefficient. But I think that deep down, lots of people know, and you also hear some people saying that. I mean, the policy is terrible. I mean, it's not like that every Israeli, at least not every liberal Zionist, will just say that these are the problems. There is some backlash, but it's more of a grassroots level backlash, and the
Mm-hmm.
mainstream media and political elites will still try to use these excuses. But on social media, you often see people saying, "Yeah, I mean, the fact that we're starving babies in Gaza." Um, is not making things better for Israel's public image.
Mm-hmm.
And we already know that this is having an effect on the Israeli economy. We see people having to move their entrepreneurs, having to register their companies abroad because they realize that they will face all kinds of sanctions, including all kinds of silent boycotts, if their companies remain registered as Israeli companies. So I mean, the boycott is here. It's growing more and more, and things that seemed inconceivable prior to October 23 in terms of boycott and entities, broad international entities willing to boycott Israel, now it's on the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
But we're pushing for some very specific major BDS goals. So the Eurovision Song Contest, Australia has participated in recent years in the
Mm-hmm.
Eurovision Song Contest. So
Mm-hmm.
perhaps
Yes.
this is something that Australians can also relate to.
Yes.
There is a move to ban Israel, and this was inconceivable 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Now it's on the agenda. I'm still sure that
Right.
Germany and Austria will try to block it, but
Mm.
uh, perhaps we may have a majority this year to actually kick Israel out of the Eurovision.
Mm.
But things are changing, and I think that at some point Israel will, I mean, if the genocide continues, Israel will be facing higher level sanctions in the West.
Yeah.
I think it's coming.
Well, the fact that in Australia, our Prime Minister is now calling it, I'm actually not sure if he's calling it a genocide, but he's definitely
Probably
very
not.
critical. He's been very critical of Israel. And Penny Wong, the foreign minister, has advised that sanctions will be taken and have been taken against Ben Gvir and Smotrich, which of course is nowhere near enough. But
Yeah,
they
in a
weren't,
way, it's a cop out because Ben-Gvir
yeah,
and Smotrich are the easy target. So yeah, I mean, it's a good movie in itself, but
yeah.
right now I'm quite wary, of these Ben-Gvir Smotrich festivals, targeting them specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that. But it has moved a lot further into that direction where they were absolutely too afraid to even say boo 2 years ago. Of course, it's no relief for the Palestinian people, the Gazans on the ground. I wanted to talk to you about the chant music festival, Death to the IDF.
Bob Dylan, Bob
Yes,
Dylan.
yes,
Yeah, they're British artists, but there's also quite a few. There are also quite a few Irish bands, Kneecap, for example,
yes.
who have chanted Free Palestine, and I think that Kneecap right now are being investigated or perhaps have been indicted in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not backing down, these artists. They're still chanting Free Palestine and posting about it. And if a festival cancels one of these artists, this festival may face a huge backlash. Um, Very
Yeah.
strong support in the music
How do you
scene
feel
for.
about that chant as a Jewish Israeli citizen where people are chanting death, death to the IDF? Do you have any strong feeling about what, any fear, any?
No, no, this is not the death to the Jews. This is a chant against the genocidal army. The IDF is committing genocide in Gaza, and this chant singles out, Israel likes to use the term singling out, Jews or whatever, and so on. This chant singles out a genocidal force in the midst of the genocide that it is perpetrating. I don't see that in any way as an anti-Jewish call, and I don't feel threatened by this call. I mean, I'm not a soldier. I became a refuser when after I sort of educated myself better.
Yeah.
I'm not part of the IDF, and I think that people who are not serving in the IDF should realize that this is not an anti-Jewish call.
Yeah. I wanted to also ask you about the fact that I've seen commentary and on social media um, and lots of podcasts talking about that on October the 7th, the IDF were told to stand down for 6 hours.
Yeah, I've seen that. I think there's some confusion around this. I know that there's this theory of, like an inside job,
Yeah.
organizing everything. Um, I'm sorry, but this theory does not make sense. I mean, to some extent, yeah, Netanyahu wanted to keep Hamas in power in Gaza because the alternative, the Palestinian Authority, means negotiations and more pressure to cede territory and perhaps dismantle settlements. There was no alliance between Israel and Hamas, though. I mean, these two are the state of Israel and Hamas are enemies. And beyond that, there was a higher level of alert in the hours preceding the operation, the Palestinian operation. So people are initially asking, oh, if Israel is so capable, it has Mossad and all these intelligence services, it's not so easy to know for a fact that this or that attack is imminent. And For example, Israel failed terribly in October 1973 in predicting the Egyptian attack when Egypt managed to cross the Suez Canal and inflict a great deal of harm on the Israeli military. One problem is that in such cases, there are repeated military maneuvers and training right on the border by the Egyptian military and also by Hamas prior to October 23. And it's hard to tell when something is real or just, another drill.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's not so easy, and it's hard to know the scope of the operation. And it also seems, I think and John Elmer of the Electronic Intifada says that apparently, I mean, we can see, I mean, state with a high degree of confidence that Israel doesn't have good sources within Hamas. I mean, look at the state. I mean, they're not really successful in getting Israeli captives out of Gaza. You would imagine that if they had good connections, good sources within Hamas, perhaps they could have arranged that. And when they managed to kill Yahya Sinwar, it was kind of accidental. They didn't know at first that it was him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like Israel knows everything that is going on in Hamas. They can recognize patterns. For example, if certain communication devices are, are being started at the same time, things like that. But it's not necessarily the case that Israel knows so much about Hamas, especially considering what we know that the precise plans, the details were kept confidential in a very small number, within a very small number of Hamas leaders, Sinwar and a few other people.
Mm-hmm.
So back to that question about the IDF being told to stand down, my understanding is that actually it's because of the high alert. They did not want to send, just one vehicle here and there with 3 or 4 soldiers right up to the border fence because this was considered risky for the soldiers there. This is another explanation. I'm not going to say that I'm entirely sure about that. I don't have a perfect explanation, but looking at the broad picture from my own perspective, is what I see is that there was a high level of alert in the preceding hours. They did not have a full picture of what was about to come, and all kinds of decisions were made, which were kind of probably had to do with some confusion on the ground, not knowing exactly what to do. Um, that's how I see it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the Israeli government orchestrated this attack, or I mean, at the very most, one could say that perhaps. I mean, then again, I mean, the Israeli military establishment, which is not really pro Netanyahu, they tend to be liberal Zionists. I don't think they would have allowed Netanyahu to, to organize something like,
Yeah.
Hamas being able to cross the border and kill Israeli citizens. First of all, I don't think Netanyahu would do that. That's not his mindset regarding privileged Jewish Israeli citizens. He would not have them killed. He's a mass murderer, but he targets Palestinians. And on top of that, his own security establishment, which tends to be liberal Zionists, would not let him get away with it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard to keep such plans secret. But there's more that we need to know. I mean, I agree with that.
Hot button issues. I think we've covered a lot of them, but is there any hot button issues that you'd like to discuss?
Perhaps one thing, now we're seeing these threats or promises by some Western states, especially the UK, Canada, Australia, to recognize Palestine, to recognize the Palestinian state
Yes.
pretty soon. And I think we should stress that this means very little if unless major sanctions are attached. And I
Yeah.
think that the UK and Canada and Australia, the leaders will still try to get away with it by just recognizing Palestine, a Palestinian state, in some abstract, meaningless way, as an outlet to, or trying to fend off their allegations that they're not calling this a genocide and imposing sanctions on Israel. And we should not let them get away with it. If they recognize a Palestinian state, we should ask them, okay, what are the borders? If you recognize a Palestinian state, first of all, it must be the 67 borders. Of course, this does not solve the problem of 1948. This does not solve the problem of Israel being inherently racist from its foundation. I'm not saying that I don't support this so-called two-state solution, but from their own perspective, if they are to recognize a Palestinian state, first of all, it should be based on the 67 borders, period.
Yeah.
And sanctions must be attached to this recognition, and we should hold them accountable. If they fail to do that again, they have to meet the moment that if they do recognize the Palestinian state, but they don't impose strong sanctions on Israel, and they don't recognize the Palestinian state based on the entire 67 framework, all of the West Bank, all of Gaza, this is not good enough. And I
Yeah.
also added that in any case, personally, as a privileged Jewish Israeli citizen, I'm still committed to the resolution of the other outstanding issues, the Nakba, the issue of Palestinian refugees, and the issue of Israel being inherently racist, even within the 67 borders.
Yeah.
But even from this narrow perspective of just focusing on the 67 occupation, recognizing Palestine, a Palestinian state in itself without sanctions, and without recognizing a Palestinian state on the entire 19th territory occupied in 1967, that would be pointless.
Yeah. Thank you, Ofer. A journalist here in Australia has said very similar sentiments to what you have discussed, Anthony Lowenstein. I wanted to circle back to your personal story that you shared right at the beginning, where you spoke about your grandmother who escaped a concentration camp or a ghetto because of an uprising. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Is that the Warsaw Ghetto?
So no, this was in Poland. This was another place. I think it was the Vilnius ghetto, but I have to check. But there was more than one uprising. But she did recount, some horror stories, having to flee as the German guards were just trying to spray them, with bullets, and trying to dodge bullets and trying to run and hide in the forest. And of course, many of us, dissidents here, we have been using the term ghetto for Gaza for years now. It's a concentration camp, it's a death camp, but before that, we were using the term ghetto. And I do accept the use of the term jailbreak for what happened on October 7th. It was a Palestinian jailbreak. So once again, yeah, violations of international law, and international law matters, and all of that, but it was several things. One of them being a Palestinian jailbreak from the Gaza ghetto into Israel. And so you can see all these connections. Survivors, local survivors from Europe, being sent here to live in empty homes, in emptied homes in depopulated Palestinian villages. So everything is so connected. And if there's any specific population or country that needs to know that, it's Germany, of course. Germany, with its, at least the German elites, political elites, with their amazing, disgusting hypocrisy, being on the wrong side of genocide each and every time.
Each and every time. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ofer, and explaining all of that and answering any of the questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add to today's conversation?
No, I think it was quite comprehensive.
Thank you for joining Jewish Activists for Peace podcast.